The airport terminal was buzzing with happy families, but I felt like I was standing in a graveyard. My husband, Henry, stood there with a smug grin, clutching our first-class tickets to the Bahamas. He told me it was a fresh start, a way to leave the stress of Greenwich behind. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, was quiet, clutching her tablet tightly. Then, she pulled my sleeve and leaned in. Her voice was a trembling whisper that shattered my soul. "Mom, Dad has a secret. He told me not to show you the emails." I looked at her screen, and my heart stopped. It was a digital receipt for the sale of the Sterling Manor, my family's ancestral home, the house my father left to me. Henry hadn't just sold our house. He had sold my legacy to cover his sins. As I looked into his lying eyes, the world went cold. He thinks we're on vacation. He has no idea that by time we land, he will regret every lie. Standing in that crowded terminal, I felt like a ghost. To everyone else, we looked like the picture-perfect Greenwich family. Henry, tall and polished in his linen travel blazer. Lily, with her blonde curls and her little pink suitcase. And me, Lucy Sterling, the woman who supposedly had everything. But as my daughter's whisper echoed in my ears, the ground beneath my designer shoes felt like it was turning into glass, ready to shatter. You see, in Greenwich, names mean everything. The Sterling name wasn't just a label, it was an institution. Sterling Manor, our ancestral home, was a majestic colonial estate that had been in my family for 4 generations. I grew up in those hallways. I remember the smell of my father's expensive pipe tobacco in the library, and the way the morning sun used to hit the grand mahogany staircase, making the wood glow like amber. When my father passed away 3 years ago, he took my hand and told me, "Lucy, keep the walls standing. This is our blood. This is our history." I promised him I would, and for a long time, I thought Henry wanted the same thing. When I met Henry, he was an outsider. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to worship the ground I walked on. He even insisted on taking my last name when we got married, saying he wanted to fully belong to the Sterling legacy. I thought it was romantic. I thought he was proud of our history. My friends in Connecticut called him the perfect husband. He was the man who always remembered anniversaries, the man who coached Lily's soccer team, and the man who seemed to handle our family's vast estate with such ease. But looking back now, I see the cracks. The late-night business calls he took from the garden, the way his hands would shake slightly when he checked the mail. The investments, he said, were just part of growing our wealth. I trusted him with my life, and more importantly, I trusted him with my father's legacy. I had no reason to believe that the man sleeping beside me every night was actually a stranger, a man with a hunger for high-stakes gambling that no amount of money could ever satisfy. A month ago, Henry started acting different. He was frantic, yet overly affectionate. He told me he had been working too hard and that we needed a reset. He pitched this trip to the Bahamas as a second honeymoon, a way for us to reconnect and for Lily to see the ocean. He handled everything. He packed the bags, he booked the flights, and he was strangely insistent on leaving Greenwich as quickly as possible. "Don't worry about a thing, Lucy," he told me that morning as we locked the front door of Sterling Manor. I remember looking back at the house, at the white columns and the ivy-covered brick, feeling a strange pang of guilt, as if the house was trying to tell me something. Henry practically shoved me into the car. He was sweating, despite the cool morning air. At the airport, he wouldn't let Lily out of his sight. He kept her tablet in his own carry-on, telling her she could only play with it once we were at the gate. I didn't think twice about it. I just thought he was being a strict parent. But then, as we sat waiting for Zone 1 to be called, he went to grab us some coffee. That's when Lily found the tablet in his bag. That's when she saw the notifications that he forgot to clear. The emails didn't just mention a sale. They mentioned a final walkthrough and keys transferred. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. My father's house, my childhood memories, my daughter's future. All of it had been traded away for a debt I didn't even know existed. As Henry walked back toward us, smiling, and holding 2 lattes as if he hadn't just destroyed my life, I realized something even more terrifying. This trip wasn't a vacation. It was an escape. And I had to know, was there anything left to save, or had he already taken everything? Before I reveal the cold truth about those one-way tickets, I have to ask, have you ever trusted someone so completely that you ignored your own intuition, only to find out they were your worst enemy? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're rooting for justice and want to see how I turn the tables on Henry, make sure to subscribe to Prime Karma Stories right now. You don't want to miss what happened when that plane finally left the ground. To understand the depth of Henry's betrayal, you have to understand what Stirling Manor represented. In a town like Greenwich, where money usually talks, Stirling Manor was the kind of place that commanded silence. It wasn't a mansion in the modern, tacky sense of the word. It was a 1920s Georgian colonial, built with stone that looked like it had grown straight out of the earth. My father, Arthur Stirling, used to say that every brick in that house was laid with a purpose, to protect the family. I can still close my eyes and feel the texture of the hand-carved molding in the dining room. I can hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock that stood in the foyer, a sound that, for 38 years, was the heartbeat of my life. That house was my sanctuary when my mother passed away, and it was my fortress when I took over the family's charitable foundation. It wasn't just real estate, it was the physical manifestation of my father's love for me. Before he died, he sat me down in his study, the one with the green leather chairs and the walls lined with first edition books, and he made me promise. "Lucy," he said, his voice raspy but firm, "wealth can come and go, but a home is an anchor. Don't ever let go of your anchor." And I didn't. Not until Henry Vance walked into my life. I met Henry at a gallery opening in Manhattan. He was charming, but not in a loud, flashy way. He was subtle. He listened more than he spoke. He told me he was an investment consultant, someone who helped old money families navigate the modern world. Looking back, that should have been my first warning. He didn't have a history of his own, so he became a student of mine. He learned my father's favorite scotch, the names of our distant cousins in England, and the exact year each wing of the manor was built. When we got married, he did something that shocked everyone in Greenwich and moved me to tears. He offered to take the Stirling name. "I want Lily to have a unified legacy," he told me, holding my hand as we looked out over the back lawn. "I want the world to know I'm a Stirling through and through." I thought it was the ultimate act of devotion. I thought he was laying down his ego to honor my family. In reality, he was just putting on a uniform. He wasn't becoming a Stirling. He was wearing the name like a camouflage suit, so he could move through my life unnoticed while he picked it clean. For the first 5 years, our life was a dream. Henry was the man every woman in our circle envied. He was the one who brought me tea in bed, the one who spent hours in the garden with Lily, teaching her how to plant peonies, my father's favorite flower. He took over the tedious parts of managing the estate. "You focus on the foundation, Lucy," he'd say, with that warm, reassuring smile. "Let me handle the taxes, the maintenance, and the trust accounts. It's the least I can do for the woman who gave me everything." I felt so lucky. I felt supported, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere in Stirling Manor began to shift. It started with small things. Henry became obsessed with diversifying our assets. He'd talk for hours about how keeping all our wealth tied up in the manor and old bonds was stagnant. He started pressuring me to sign papers. Lots of them. "Just a formality for the new LLC," he'd say, sliding a document across the mahogany desk while kissing my forehead. I was busy with the foundation, busy being a mother, and I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was a Stirling. He was my anchor. Then, there were the moods. Sometimes, I'd walk into his study and find him staring at his computer screen, his face pale, and his eyes bloodshot. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd snap at me, something he never used to do, before immediately pivoting back to his charming self, blaming market volatility, and stressful clients. I started noticing that some of my mother's heirloom jewelry was missing from the safe. When I mentioned it, Henry was horrified. He suggested we had a security breach and insisted on hiring a new firm, which he, of course, chose himself. I realize now that there was no security firm. There were only pawn shops and high-stakes poker rooms in underground clubs that I didn't even know existed in Connecticut. Henry wasn't investing our money. He was feeding a monster. A gambling addiction is like a fire. It starts with a few sparks, but eventually, it needs to burn the whole forest down to stay alive. And Henry had decided that my father's house was the perfect fuel. In the months leading up to the vacation, Henry's behavior reached a fever pitch. He was more affectionate than ever, almost desperately so. He bought me expensive gifts, which I now know were bought with my own credit lines. He talked incessantly about our future, about how we needed a clean break from the gray skies of Connecticut. He convinced me that we were just going to the Bahamas for 2 weeks to find ourselves again. But that morning at the airport, as I sat in the plastic chair of the terminal, watching him walk away to get coffee, I looked at Lily. She was staring at her tablet with a look of pure confusion. "Mommy," she asked, "why does the man on the computer say 'sold' over the picture of our house?" That was the moment the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. My husband wasn't taking us on a vacation. He was taking us away because we no longer had a home to go back to. He had sold my father's legacy, my daughter's inheritance, and our entire life, and he thought I was too weak to stop him. As I sat there, paralyzed by the realization that my husband was a thief who had stolen the very roof over our heads, I looked up and saw him coming back. He had a coffee in each hand, and that same perfect smile on his face. He didn't know I knew. He didn't know that the loyal wife he had been playing for a fool for years was gone, replaced by a woman who was about to show him exactly what happens when you try to steal from a sterling. I sat there, frozen. The airport terminal, once a blur of movement and noise, suddenly went silent. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, a dull, rhythmic thud that matched the pounding of my heart. I looked down at Lily's tablet again, praying I had misread it, but there it was, an email from a high-end real estate brokerage in Manhattan. The subject line read, "Closing confirmation, 124 Sterling Way, my home, my father's home, sold for nearly $9 million. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the arms of my chair to keep from falling. I looked up and saw Henry. He was weaving through the crowd, 2 Starbucks cups in his hands, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. He looked so carefree, so light. While I was sitting there, watching my entire world dissolve into a pile of digital ash. As he got closer, my survival instinct kicked in. A sterling never makes a scene in public. It was a rule my father had drilled into me since I was a little girl. "Never let them see you sweat, Lucy," he'd say. "Dignity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you give it away." I took a deep, shaky breath, closed the email on Lily's tablet, and handed it back to her. "Don't say anything to Daddy, sweetie," I whispered, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "It's a surprise." Lily looked at me with those big, perceptive blue eyes. She knew something was wrong. She could feel the vibration of my terror, but she nodded, sliding the tablet into her backpack, just as Henry reached us. "Here we go, ladies. Extra foam for the boss," he said, handing me the cup with a wink. His hand brushed against mine, and I fought the urge to pull away as if I'd been touched by a snake. His skin felt cold. "Zone 1 is about to board. Are you ready for paradise, Lucy?" "I'm ready, Henry," I said, forcing my lips into a smile that felt like it was made of dry paper. As we stood up and began walking toward the gate, my mind began to race backward, replaying the last 6 months like a film strip caught in a projector. The signs hadn't been invisible. I had just been blinded by my own loyalty. I remembered the night I found him in the garage at 3:00 a.m., sitting in his car with the lights off. When I tapped on the window, he nearly jumped out of his skin. He told me he just needed some air, that the pressure of the new merger was getting to him. I believed him. I remembered the day the bank called about a suspicious withdrawal of $50,000 from our joint savings. Henry told me it was a temporary transfer to a high-yield offshore account he was testing. I believed him, but the most painful memory was the update to the trust papers he brought home 3 months ago. He told me it was just a technicality to ensure Lily's future in case anything happened to us. He'd been so tender that night. He made dinner, opened a bottle of my favorite vintage, and talked about how much he admired my father. I signed those papers without reading the fine print. I signed away the title to Sterling Manor, believing I was protecting it. He didn't just steal my money. He used my love for my father and my daughter as a weapon against me. He knew exactly which heartstrings to pull to get my signature on those forged documents. We reached the gate, and Henry pulled out our boarding passes. He was fumbling with his phone, his thumb swiping rapidly. That's when I saw it. Over his shoulder, on the digital boarding pass screen, it didn't say round trip. It said, one way. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't just selling the house to pay a debt. He was running. He had no intention of ever taking us back to Connecticut. He was moving us to the Bahamas to hide from whatever creditors or legal trouble was chasing him, leaving the wreckage of my life behind. He was going to keep me in a gilded cage in a foreign country, where I'd have no house, no friends, and no way to reclaim what was mine. I looked at the back of his head, at his perfectly groomed hair, and his expensive watch. This man was a predator. He had spent years studying me, learning my weaknesses, and waiting for the moment to strike. And now, he thought he was in the clear. He thought the flight was his victory lap. The gate agent's voice crackled over the speaker. Now boarding Zone 1 for Flight 442 to Nassau. Henry turned to me, his eyes bright with a frantic kind of excitement. That's us, Lou. Let's go. A new life is waiting. I looked at Lily, who was holding my hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Then I looked at the jet bridge, the long, narrow tunnel that led to the plane. Once I stepped onto that aircraft, I would be trapped with him for 3 hours at 30,000 feet. But as I took that first step, a strange kind of calm washed over me. The sorrow was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but it was being wrapped in something much harder. Steel. Henry thought he was taking me to the Bahamas to disappear. He didn't realize that he had just handed me 3 hours of uninterrupted time with a satellite Wi-Fi connection and every password to our joint accounts. He thought he was the one in control because he held the tickets. But he forgot one thing. I am a Sterling, and in my family, we don't just protect our legacy. We destroy anyone who tries to tear it down. As the flight attendant greeted us at the door of the plane, Henry led us toward the first-class cabin, already ordering a glass of champagne. He settled into his seat, closed his eyes, and exhaled a sigh of relief, thinking he had finally escaped his sins. He had no idea that while he slept, I was about to open my laptop and start a fire that would burn his entire world to the ground before we even crossed the Florida coastline. The cabin of the first-class section was bathed in a soft, artificial blue light as we leveled off at 30,000 feet. It was a space designed for comfort, for luxury, but to me, it felt like a pressurized cage. Across the aisle, Henry had already finished his second glass of vintage champagne. He looked at me, his eyes heavy with a mixture of exhaustion and a triumph he couldn't quite hide. "Get some sleep, Lucy," he murmured, reaching over to pat my hand. "When you wake up, we'll be over the turquoise water. Everything is going to be perfect." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I watched him settle back into the plush leather seat, pull the silk sleep mask over his eyes, and adjust his blanket. Within 10 minutes, his breathing became deep and rhythmic. He was out. He actually felt safe enough to sleep right next to the woman he had just systematically destroyed. I waited another 5 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, I leaned over and gently pulled Lily's backpack from under the seat in front of me. She was already curled up, clutching her stuffed rabbit, drifting into a restless sleep. I pulled out the tablet. The device was warm in my hands. I knew Henry's passcode. It was Lily's birthday, a choice that now felt like a sick joke. I didn't go back to the emails. I needed more. I needed to see the why. I went straight to the browser history and the hidden files. What I found in the next hour was a descent into a nightmare I never could have imagined. Henry hadn't just sold Sterling Manor. He had been cannibalizing our lives for years. I found spreadsheets labeled with names of offshore gambling sites I didn't recognize. The numbers were staggering. Tens of thousands of dollars gone in a single night. Transactions labeled as business consultations were actually transfers to private bookmakers in Macau and Las Vegas. But the deepest cut came when I found a folder titled Estate Finalization. Inside were digital copies of the papers I had signed 3 months ago, the ones I thought were protecting Lily's future. He hadn't just added himself to the trust. He had used a power of attorney clause buried in the fine print to transfer the title of the manor into a shell company he controlled. He had then sold that company to a developer who planned to turn my father's gardens into a luxury condominium complex. My father's roses, the oak tree where I had a swing as a child. All of it had been traded for a seat at a high-stakes poker table. Then, I opened the banking app. I checked Lily's college fund, the account my father had started the day she was born, the one I had been faithfully contributing to every month. Balance, $0.14. The air felt thin. I felt like I was suffocating in the recycled cabin air. He had taken everything. He had even drained my personal savings, moving the money through a series of investment accounts until it disappeared into a digital fog. The realization was a cold, hard blade in my gut. Henry wasn't just a gambler. He was a thief who had used his own family as a personal bank. He was taking us to the Bahamas not for a vacation, but because he had already spent the proceeds from the house sale to pay off the most dangerous of his debts, and he needed to get out of the country before the buyer's lawyers realized the titles were contested. I looked over at him. He looked so peaceful, so perfect. This was the man I had shared a bed with. This was the man I had trusted with my daughter's life. He had stood at my father's funeral and wept, promising to take care of me, all while he was likely calculating the value of the silver in the dining room. A cold, diamond-hard clarity took over my mind. The sorrow was pushed into a small, dark corner of my heart, and in its place rose a terrifying, icy resolve. I pulled my own laptop from my bag. Henry had forgotten that before I became a mother and a wife, I was a Sterling, and Sterlings were built on the backs of brilliant bankers and ruthless negotiators. He thought I was just a socialite who didn't understand the numbers. He thought he could bury his tracks in a web of offshore transfers. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had given me 3 hours of uninterrupted Wi-Fi and access to his primary device while he slept. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I didn't wake him up to scream. That would be too easy. Instead, I began to type. I started by logging into our joint trust account, the one he thought he had successfully drained. He had moved the last $2 million into a holding account in Nassau, ready for him to withdraw once we landed. My fingers flew across the keys. I wasn't just going to take the money back. I was going to make sure that by the time we touched down on that island, Henry Sterling would be a man with no name, no money, and no place to hide. As the pilot announced we were beginning our initial descent into the Caribbean, I closed my laptop with a quiet click. I looked at the transfer complete notification on my screen. I had just moved every cent Henry had left into an ironclad trust that only I could touch. He was about to wake up in a tropical paradise, believing he was a king. He had no idea that I had just turned his fresh start into his final ending. The wheels of the Boeing 777 hit the tarmac with a violent thud, a sound that felt like the final gavel in a courtroom. We had landed in Nassau. To the other passengers, the chime of the seatbelt sign was a signal that vacation had finally begun. To me, it was the sound of a trap being set. Henry stirred beside me, blinking his eyes as he pulled the silk mask up to his forehead. He looked out the window at the palm trees swaying in the distance, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. He didn't look like a man who had just stolen a legacy. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He stretched his arms over his head, leaning over to kiss my cheek. His breath smelled of expensive champagne and betrayal. "We made it, Lucy," he whispered, his voice thick with a fake tenderness that made my skin crawl. A new chapter. No more Greenwich stress. Just us. I forced myself to look him in the eyes. I didn't pull away. I didn't scream. I just nodded, my face a mask of weary, trusting compliance. Just us, Henry. Exactly what you wanted. As we taxied toward the gate, my hand stayed firmly on my handbag. Inside, tucked into a hidden side pocket, were our passports. But more importantly, inside my mind was the confirmation of the digital fire I had started while he slept. During those 3 hours over the Atlantic, I hadn't just moved the $2 million from the holding account. I had spent that time meticulously locking him out of every digital corridor of my life. I had changed recovery emails, updated security questions only I would know the answers to, and sent a predated instruction to our private banker in Connecticut to freeze all joint credit lines effective immediately due to suspected fraudulent activity. The perfect husband was about to walk into a paradise that had no room for him. Walking through the Nassau airport felt like moving through a dream. The air was thick and humid, smelling of salt and jet fuel. Henry was in high spirits, practically skipping toward the immigration line. He was acting like the big shot again, complaining about the wait and telling Lily about the massive suite he had booked at the resort. He kept talking about the private beach and the infinity pool, oblivious to the fact that he was describing a prison he couldn't afford. "I'll handle the passports, honey," he said, reaching for my bag as we approached the customs officer. I tightened my grip. "No, it's fine. I have them right here with the boarding passes. You keep an eye on Lily." He shrugged, unfazed. His arrogance was his ultimate blind spot. He truly believed I was still the same Lucy Sterling who let him handle the tedious details. He believed I was still the woman who signed whatever he put in front of her because I was too refined to worry about money. He didn't realize that when he sold my father's house, he burned away the socialite and woke up the Sterling. After we cleared customs, a private car was waiting for us. Henry had spared no expense. Or rather, he had spared none of my money. The black SUV drove us through the winding roads of the island, past colorful houses and sparkling turquoise water. Henry spent the entire ride on his phone, likely checking his new accounts. But the service was spotty, and I watched him huff with annoyance when a page wouldn't load. "Stupid island Wi-Fi," he muttered, tossing his phone onto the leather seat. "I need to check the final transfer from the escrow account." I looked out the window, watching a group of local children playing near the shore. "Don't worry about work now, Henry. You said this was a reset. The money will be there when we get to the hotel." "You're right," he said, reclining his seat. "The money isn't going anywhere." Oh, he was right about that. The money wasn't going anywhere, except into a trust fund that would pay for Lily's college and the legal fees I was about to incur to sue him into oblivion. We pulled up to the entrance of the resort, a sprawling white stone palace that looked like something out of a movie. The staff rushed to open our doors, greeting us with cold towels and tropical drinks. Henry stepped out like a king returning to his court. He tipped the driver $20 with a flourish, his chest puffed out. As we walked into the grand marble lobby, the sheer scale of the luxury was breathtaking. The vaulted ceilings, the scent of fresh hibiscus, the sound of a fountain splashing in the center of the room. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And it was the most expensive place on the island. Henry walked straight to the VIP check-in desk, leaning over the counter with a confident smile. "Sterling," he said, his voice booming. "The presidential suite. I believe everything is pre-authorized." The receptionist, a young woman with a polite smile, began typing into her computer. I stood a few feet back, holding Lily's hand. My heart was thumping in my throat. This was the moment. This was where the one-way trip Henry planned for me turned into his one-way trip to nowhere. "One moment, Mr. Sterling," the woman said, her smile wavering just a fraction as she looked at the screen. She tried swiping the card Henry had handed her, the black card that was supposed to be his ticket to a new life. A red light flashed on the terminal. Henry's smile didn't fade yet. He just chuckled. "Try it again. The chip can be finicky." She tried again. Red light. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice dropping to a professional whisper. "The transaction was declined by the issuing bank. Do you have another form of payment?" I watched the back of Henry's neck. A slow, dark red flush began to creep up from his collar. Henry laughed, a nervous, jagged sound that didn't reach his eyes. He reached into his wallet, pulling out another card, then another, his movements becoming more frantic with every second. He didn't know that every swipe was a notification on my phone, and he didn't know that I was standing behind him, watching his perfect world crumble in the middle of a marble lobby, while I held the only thing that could get him off this island. The passports he thought I'd never have the courage to take. The red light on the credit card terminal felt like a laser beam burning a hole through Henry's forehead. He stood there, frozen, The polite but firm gaze of the receptionist pinned on him like a specimen under a microscope. The silence in the marble lobby was deafening, broken only by the gentle splashing of the fountain and the distant mocking sound of a steel drum band playing outside. "There must be a mistake," Henry stammered, his voice jumping an octave. He was sweating now, actual beads of perspiration rolling down his temples and staining the collar of his expensive travel shirt. "I just moved $2 million into this account this morning. Check again, please." The receptionist's smile was gone, replaced by the practiced, icy neutrality of a high-end resort manager. "I've tried 3 different cards, Mr. Sterling. All of them have been flagged by the issuing bank for urgent security review. They won't even let me run a manual override." I stood 3 paces behind him, watching the man I once loved wither under the weight of his own greed. This was the moment I had built during those 3 hours in the sky, while he was dreaming of a life paid for by my father's stolen legacy. I was systematically dismantling his existence. I hadn't just moved the money. I had called our private banker from the plane's Wi-Fi. I told them that my husband's accounts had been compromised. I told them he was under duress. I gave them every reason to lock him out of the world until I could get back to a U.S. jurisdiction. Henry turned to me, his eyes wide and wild, like a cornered animal. "Lucy, honey, do you have your card? The Sterling Trust card? There's some kind of technical glitch. I'll fix it as soon as the banks open in New York, I swear." I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the perfect husband. I saw a desperate small man who had gambled away his soul. I reached into my bag, my fingers brushing against the 3 passports, mine, Lily's, and the one I had slipped out of his jacket while he was sleeping at 30,000 feet. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, Henry," I said, my voice as smooth and calm as the Caribbean Sea. "Why don't you go with the manager to the back office? See if you can get through to the international department on a landline. I'll take Lily to the cafe to get some lunch. She's famished." He exhaled a jagged breath of relief. He actually believed me. Even now, at the end of the line, his arrogance was so thick he couldn't imagine a world where I was the one holding the knife. Yes, okay. You go eat. I'll sort this out. It's just a glitch. I'll meet you at the suite in 20 minutes. 20 minutes, I repeated. I watched him follow the manager toward a set of heavy mahogany doors. He walked with a slight limp, his shoulders hunched, his big-shot persona deflating with every step. He was walking into a room where he would spend the next 2 hours on hold with banks that wouldn't talk to him, trying to access money that was already tucked away in a trust he could never touch. As soon as the doors closed behind him, I didn't head for the cafe. I turned to the bellhop who was standing by our luggage. "Change of plans," I said, handing him a $100 bill. It was the last bit of cash Henry had left in his wallet before I took it. "I need my bags and my daughter's bag loaded into a taxi immediately. We have a family emergency and need to head back to the airport." "What about the gentleman, ma'am?" the bellhop asked, confused. "He's staying," I said, my voice hardening. "He has a lot of business to attend to." I grabbed Lily's hand. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. She didn't ask where Daddy was. She didn't ask why we were leaving. She just squeezed my hand, a silent signal that she understood. We walked out of that palace of lies and into the bright, blistering sun. As the taxi pulled away from the resort, I looked back at the grand entrance. Somewhere in that maze of marble and hibiscus, Henry was realizing that his fresh start had just become his final exile. He had no money, no credit, and in exactly 5 minutes, he would realize he had no passport to leave the island. The taxi driver looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Back to the airport so soon? You just got here, lady." I leaned back against the seat and looked out at the ocean. "I've been away from home for too long," I told him. I had the house title to fix, a legacy to reclaim, and a law firm to hire. But first, I had to make sure Henry understood that the Sterling family doesn't get evicted. We do the evicting. Back in the manager's office of the resort, the walls were beginning to close in on Henry. He had been on the phone for 45 minutes, bouncing between automated menus and cold robotic bank representatives who told him the same thing over and over. Your access has been restricted due to a security override initiated by the primary account holder. I am the account holder, Henry screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking. He looked up to see the hotel manager and 2 security guards standing by the door. Their presence was no longer a courtesy. It was a barricade. The manager, a man who had seen every type of fraudster pass through these islands, looked at Henry not as a VIP, but as a liability. Mr. Sterling, the manager said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low tone. The car service alone is $800. The non-refundable deposit for the presidential suite is $9,000. And right now, we have no valid form of payment and no collateral. I must ask you again, where is your wife? Henry's heart skipped a beat. A cold, oily sensation slid down his spine. She's at the cafe, with our daughter. I'll go get her. She has the backup card. He practically tripped over his own feet as he ran back into the lobby. He scanned the hibiscus-scented space, his eyes darting toward the cafe. It was empty. He ran to the fountain, then to the entrance. He grabbed a bellhop by the shoulders. My wife! The blonde woman with the little girl. Where are they? The bellhop looked at him with pity. The lady took a taxi, sir. 10 minutes ago. She said you were staying behind for business. Henry's knees buckled. He reached into his blazer pocket, his fingers searching for the familiar leather of his passport case. It was empty. He checked the other pocket. Nothing. He checked his briefcase. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. She hadn't just left him. She had erased him. He was a man with no money, no identification, and a $10,000 bill in a country where he was now an illegal alien. He was the king of the Bahamas, sitting on a throne of sand that was being washed away by the tide. While Henry was hyperventilating in that marble lobby, I was sitting in the back of a taxi, watching the palm trees blur past the window. I felt a strange sense of lightness, as if I had shed a heavy, leaden skin that I had been wearing for years. Lily was asleep next to me, her head resting on her backpack, finally at peace. I pulled out my phone. The signal was strong now. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call my mother. I called the only person who could help me finish what I started, Mr. Abernathy, the Sterling family lawyer who had served my father for 30 years. Lucy? Abernathy's voice was warm, but surprised. I thought you were on your way to Nassau. I'm at the airport, Mr. Abernathy, and I need you to file an emergency injunction on the sale of Sterling Manor immediately. My voice was steady, devoid of the sorrow that had plagued me for months. I have digital proof of forgery, identity theft, and the fraudulent use of a minor's social security number. Henry is currently detained in the Bahamas. He won't be back to contest anything. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a soft chuckle. Your father always said you had the sterling spine, Lucy. I'll have the papers at the courthouse before they close today. We'll get your house back. I hung up and looked at the boarding gate. Our flight back to New York was departing in an hour. I had used the last of my personal emergency credit to buy those tickets. The only account Henry didn't know existed because my father had set it up for me when I was 18. He always told me to have a getaway fund, just in case. I never thought I'd use it to escape my own husband. As I walked toward the gate, I felt the eyes of the other travelers on me. I probably looked like a mess. My hair was windblown, my eyes were tired, but I walked with my head held high. I was no longer the victim of a gambler's greed. I was the protector of a legacy. Henry thought he could sell the walls that raised me. He thought he could trade my daughter's future for a hand of cards. But he forgot that a house isn't just wood and stone. It's the people who know how to fight for it. As we boarded the plane back to the States, I looked out the window one last time at the island. Somewhere down there, Henry was realizing that the one-way trip he planned for me was actually his own life sentence. He was about to find out exactly how much a Sterling Manor is worth when you're trying to buy your way out of a jail cell. The iron gates of Sterling Manor groaned as they swung open, a sound that usually signaled the end of a long day. But today, it sounded like a victory march. As the car rolled up the long gravel driveway, the white columns of the house emerged through the Greenwich mist, standing tall and defiant. My house, my father's house. Mr. Abernathy was waiting on the front porch, holding a leather briefcase and a look of grim satisfaction. He didn't say a word as I stepped out of the car. He simply handed me a set of keys. The emergency injunction had worked. Because Henry had forged my signature and used Lily's identity to facilitate the sale, the entire transaction was flagged as high-level fraud. The developer, a man who valued his reputation more than a piece of contested real estate, had backed out the moment the FBI started asking questions. Walking back into that foyer felt like taking my first breath of oxygen after drowning. The grandfather clock was still ticking. The scent of old books and floor wax was still there. Henry had tried to sell the walls, but he couldn't sell the soul of this place. I led Lily up the mahogany staircase, tucked her into her own bed, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I heard her breathe a sigh of relief as she fell into a deep, safe sleep. But my work wasn't finished. While I was reclaiming my life in Connecticut, Henry was finding out exactly how small the world gets when you have no money and no name. 2 days after I left him in that marble lobby, I received a call from a U.S. consular officer in Nassau. They informed me that a Mr. Henry Sterling was being held in a local detention center. The resort had pressed charges for theft of services after he failed to pay the $10,000 bill. To make matters worse, since I had reported his passport stolen and his accounts as fraudulent, the local authorities were treating him as a high-risk vagrant. "He's asking for you, Mrs. Sterling," the officer said. "He says there's been a terrible mistake and that you'll clear it all up." I looked out the window at my father's rose garden, the sun finally breaking through the clouds. "Tell him he's mistaken," I said, my voice as cold as a New England winter. "I don't know a Henry Sterling. I only know a Henry Vance, and as of this morning, I've filed for a total annulment on the grounds of criminal fraud. He is no longer part of this family. Henry had taken my name to hide his sins. He had used the Sterling reputation to build a house of cards, but in the end, the very name he stole was what buried him. Without my signature and without my money, he was nothing but a ghost in a tropical prison, waiting for a court date he couldn't afford a lawyer for. The exile I left him in wasn't just about a hotel bill. It was the realization that he was an outsider. He had never belonged in Greenwich. He had never belonged in the Sterling Library. He was a man who lived on the surface of things, and when the surface broke, he had nothing to hold on to. A month later, the house was fully back in my name. The accounts were being rebuilt, and the college fund was being restored through a series of legal settlements. I spent my afternoons in the garden with Lily, planting new peonies near the oak tree. The house felt different now, stronger somehow. It had survived a storm, and so had I. I learned that a legacy isn't something you just inherit. It's something you defend. Henry thought I was a fragile ornament of the Sterling estate, but he forgot that Sterlings are made of the same stone as the walls of this house. We don't break, we endure, and we always make sure that karma finds its way home. Henry is still in the Bahamas, facing a long legal battle with no one to call and no way out. He sold my past to fund his greed, and in the end, he lost his future. I want to thank you for walking this journey with me. This story is a reminder to every woman watching. Trust your gut, protect your legacy, and never let anyone make you feel small in your own home. Before you go, I have one final question. Do you believe that some people are beyond redemption? Or does everyone deserve a second chance? Even a man like Henry? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found satisfaction in seeing justice served, please hit that like button and subscribe to Prime Karma Stories. We stand for the truth, for family, and for the belief that what goes around always comes back. Until next time, stay strong and keep your legacy safe.